a couple weeks after the massive spill by ExxonMobil in the Pegasus pipeline, we are still seeing images circulating every day about toxic tar sands crude. Almost 500,000 gallons of toxic crude and contaminated water that's going down people's driveways, down the street. We've seen sheens of water, contaminated water, questions about the adverse health impacts that people are feeling as a result of this spill. And so we wanted to bring some Sierra Club experts and others together to talk about this spill, what its impacts are for the people in Mayflower, Arkansas, what the linkages are between the Pegasus line and the proposed Keystone XL pipeline, and what it really means for our challenge to get off oil. So first we have Glenn Hooks. Glenn, you may have seen him recently on the Colbert Report. You might have seen him on NBC Nightly News. You've probably seen him on MSNBC. He's getting more air coverage these days than Lady Gaga, I do believe. That's a technical, it's an accurate statement. Just got it confirmed. And he is the long-standing, long-time organizer and director of the Sierra Club in Arkansas, doing a great job on a whole range of different issues. We also have Lena Moffitt, who is our lead lobbyist working out of Washington, D.C. on the Beyond Oil campaign. She's also had her hand in a number of major Sierra Club initiatives over the last couple of years. She's an organizer, lobbyist extraordinaire, so she's here with us as well. And if we can pull it off, we also hope to have Dr. Ricky Ott with us. Dr. Ott is a longtime hero of mine. She was on the front lines of the Exxon Valdez spill more than almost 25 years or so ago. She has been a leader in the fight to hold BP accountable for its spill 3 years ago and has lots to share about the impacts of our dependence on oil and the consequences of these oil spills from Alaska to the Gulf to now Arkansas and beyond. So Glenn, why don't we start with you actually? Can you just start by saying, when I know you grew up near Mayflower, and you were there a couple hours after the spill, maybe a day or so after the spill. Can you talk about what you first saw there and what you encountered?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. The scene when driving into Mayflower was really something to behold, because I want to make sure everybody understands that Mayflower, Arkansas is really a lot less of a city and more of an area. It's a town of maybe 2,000 people, but it's very rural in nature. And I've made this trip so many times as a boy. My grandparents had a house up there, and we fished Lake Conway. That's where every year on our birthdays, the grandkids would be required to go out and fish until they'd caught the number of fish that matched their age that year. And so we all grew up doing that every year of our lives. And to be driving into Mayflower after Good Friday this year and being able to smell the tar sand spill before you even got off of the exit in Mayflower, Arkansas was pretty disconcerting, to say the least. I was able to make it into the neighborhood where the rupture happened. Just absolutely disgusting yards soaked through with tar sands, running down the streets, workers everywhere in hazmat suits. It was not what you expect to see in Mayflower, Arkansas. And my hearts have really gone out to the neighbors I've been able to visit with over the last couple of weeks as we work really hard with them to make sure that everybody understands that the number one priority in all this is making sure that ExxonMobil makes these people whole and makes their health the number one priority. But the larger picture is that we got to make sure that that we as a nation don't tie ourselves to these Canadian tar sands with the Keystone XL pipeline. It's a really bad scene in Mayflower, Arkansas right now.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Exxon, because since you've been there on the ground, you have an opportunity to measure the gap between what is being said by Exxon, or how Exxon's role is being portrayed, and what it's really like on the ground. So can you just describe firsthand your observations about what Exxon's role is in Mayflower?
Certainly. From the very beginning, from the very first time I set foot in Mayflower after the disaster, it was very clear to me that ExxonMobil was running the show. They were directing who could go where, whether it's in public areas or private areas, restricting access to the neighborhoods. Later on, asked for and received a no-fly zone over the rupture site after some news media had taken some pictures there. My story that I like to tell the most is on the Tuesday after the Friday spill, Exxon held a meeting in Mayflower High School for ostensibly invitation only for to talk with the families. I went to this meeting, and I was met at the door by two representatives from Exxon who, in no uncertain terms, says that I was not allowed to be at this meeting. And I informed them that I was going to stay at this meeting. It was a public building, first of all, a high school, numerous public officials there, and numerous public issues to be discussed. And I had been invited by one of the neighbors, excuse me. So I ended up staying. The devastating part for me was that every other member of the Arkansas media was told that they could not come in, and they acquiesced. They didn't even fight back. So I think Exxon's got a real strong, obvious strategy here to try to very carefully control the message. We're going to make sure that we get facts that are independently verified and not just get the information that's being given to us by ExxonMobil. The health of the people of Mayflower is too important to just trust to a multinational corporation.
I would like to ask you to think about this a little bit more, and we'll be doing some research and consulting with some of our allies as well, because as we know, for these spills, and they're happening frequently in Utah, and Montana, and Michigan, and the Gulf, and Alaska, oil spills seem to be becoming more and more common. They certainly are regular, and not everybody can move, as you know. Not everybody has the financial flexibility. Not everybody wants to leave the town that they grew up in or the town that they've built a community around, even if they did have that ability. So, clearly we need to have better policies in place and standards in place to protect the health of folks. Clearly we need to reduce our dependence on oil. In the short term, that's not providing real. So, please, let's keep talking. And as the Sierra Club works to develop some tools for families and parents, we'll be posting them on our website, our Facebook site, and on Twitter. But I want to go to Lena for just a second to say that, Lena, as you know, as you're very well aware, in a few weeks, the State Department will be ending its review period for the proposed Keystone XL pipeline. So I have a very specific question for you, which is that, does this review include an assessment of the health impacts of tar sands crude, and what process is underway to respond to this latest spill and evaluate the risks that it poses to families along the pipeline route?
Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you guys for joining. I would just say briefly that no, the State Department does an inadequate job and actually acknowledges that the health impacts of heavy oil like tar sands are relatively unknown. The disturbing thing is, though, that the document does acknowledge that tar sands oil is even worse than conventional crude, that it contains more known carcinogens, particularly dilbit, as Dr. Ott, I believe, was saying, because it's bitumen, which is a very, very heavy form of hydrocarbon, which contains more impurities, 11 times more heavy metal, but then that's mixed with another hydrocarbon, usually a natural gas distillate, that then has even more known carcinogens like toluene, benzene, and when you see a tar sand spill like the devastation we're seeing in Arkansas, the natural gas distillate will then vaporize, sort of spreading the impacts of this oil even farther into the air. And then if we're so unfortunate that the bitumen goes into a water column, like a river, like we saw in Kalamazoo, Michigan, that oil will then sink. And the disturbing thing is, the State Department acknowledges this is a potentially more dangerous source of oil, but the impacts are relatively unknown, and we are obviously seeing that the protocol for cleaning it up when it inevitably does spill doesn't exist. So we've seen in Kalamazoo, Michigan, almost 3 years ago now, that oil still is not cleaned up, unfortunately. And that's $1 billion later. This was the largest onshore oil spill that's still not cleaned up, and most expensive to clean up, I might add. And I think the most disturbing part, and this is something we've highlighted recently in a letter to the State Department saying, hey, you guys have to take another look at this before you go forward with a pipeline 10 times the size of the Pegasus line. There's no emergency response plan in place for Keystone right now. And we very much think that should be part of the public document before these communities have to go forward and think about the risks that they're going to have to undertake, really to bring profits to big oil.
Right.
So we have asked the State Department for that emergency response plan, and unfortunately, federal regulations are so lax right now they're not required to even write that document until after the pipeline is operational. And that's just, an unacceptable situation.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so actually, before we go into how people can get involved in this, Glenn, just to go to you for a second, can you describe what is the presence or the role of state environmental officials in EPA right now? How would you describe it?
Well, they're on the ground, and I've seen them there. I think that it would be a fair statement to say that I'm a little disappointed as to how things have gone so far. Frankly, I think that there haven't been enough precautions taken. I was there, say, on Monday after the Good Friday spill, in the neighborhood right next to the rupture. There were hazmat guys all around, none of them wearing even ventilators. Nobody was wearing any sort of air protection at all. And I've asked some of the regulators at our state level about that, and I don't want to say that they've laughed us off, but they've really not shown the level of concern that I think needs to be shown. They've said, oh, we've tested the air, the levels are fine, there's no need to do that kind of stuff. If I had to guess, I think that there's a much more sinister thing at play here, that Exxon doesn't want 600 workers walking around Mayflower, Arkansas wearing ventilators. It makes for a more sinister looking picture, but it would protect those workers. Certainly have had reports of school children being sickened and having to go home. I've been sick the last couple of days. I don't know if it's because of that, but I spent a lot of time in Mayflower. I'm going to go back, and when I do, I'm going to be wearing air protection. So I want to say that our folks are there on the ground, our state regulators and the EPA are there on the ground. I don't know what kind of good job they're doing because there's been pretty much a lockdown on a lot of this information so far.
So Lena, back to you to close. Let's talk about the Keystone XL pipeline, and if you could just say, how can folks get involved? We've been talking a lot about what parents or doctors or state officials need to be doing in Mayflower, both to deal with the immediate concerns as well as some of the long-term concerns. We, of course, know that there's a massive pipeline that's being proposed that would carry 830,000 barrels of toxic tar sands crude every day down from the tar sands through the U.S. Most of it would be exported. How can people get involved to make sure that this pipeline isn't built, that we invest instead in clean energy resources, that we build on the successes in the last couple of years on scaling up solar and wind and advanced batteries? How can people get involved to advance the solutions as well as prevent future problems like what we've been hearing about?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So, I'm hearing an echo. So we're in a really important time for public involvement around Keystone right now, and folks absolutely should make their voices heard. The community is trying to collect up to 1 million comments to the State Department's latest environmental impact statement. So please do go online, go to the State Department's website, and you can submit your comment to an email address they have there. Remind them that we've seen the spills in Arkansas, we've seen the spills in Michigan, and we don't want to accept the risks that these kinds of pipelines come with. So in addition to submitting comments, again, you have to do that before April 22nd. It is the closing period for the last comment period, and this might be the very last time the public has a formal opportunity to make their voices heard. If you happen to live in Nebraska, there's going to be a very big public hearing on April 18th, the only public hearing that they gave us this time around on Keystone. So we hope tons of folks will turn out at that hearing to give their public testimony there to the State Department, and again, to make their voices heard that we don't want this toxic pipeline. I would also say that it's really important that your elected officials know about the overwhelming opposition from activists and local community members like Glenn. So call your senators, call your representatives, ask them to tell President Obama to reject Keystone XL. It is crucial, particularly that senators stand up and say no to this kind of high carbon fuel like tar sands, and yes to the kind of clean energy solutions that we already have, and we don't need this pipeline. So again, submit your comment before April 22nd and call your senator and ask them to oppose Keystone XL. And one last policy note I would make, one of the most egregious things we're seeing now is tar sands transporters don't have to pay into the Oil Spill Liability Trust Fund because of a funny loophole that the IRS said that tar sands isn't crude oil. That's another initiative we're trying to get overturned now. So companies like Exxon, when their tar sands pipelines spill, they have to pay into the fund that will help clean up communities like Mayflower. And that's something you can even submit in your comment to the State Department when you go to their website. That's something that the government should really be taking into account here.
Just another example of the free ride that some of these oil companies get. Let me thank Dr. Ott for joining us on this call. Sorry we couldn't connect you by video, but hopefully we will be able to do so next time. Glenn Hooks, you're doing a great job in Arkansas. Thank you so much for your tireless work. Lena, you're fantastic as always. And I wanted to end on a bit of a positive note by saying that last fall, President Obama signed a final order coming from EPA to double the vehicle efficiency across the U.S. fleet. Our cars, our trucks, our SUVs will, by the time the rule is fully implemented in 2025, double the average amount of miles that a car can go on a gallon of gas. This one rule, this one order coming from the Obama administration will save 3 million barrels of oil in the United States every day, once it's fully implemented. That's about 4 times the amount of oil that would go through the Keystone Pipeline. And the way that that rule went forward, it started with grassroots activism. Here in California, where local community groups rallied together to improve public health, to fight climate change, and pass the Pavley Act more than a decade or so ago. More than a dozen states followed suit. That helped to inspire the Obama administration soon after taking office to enact the first round of car rules to increase vehicle efficiency to 35 miles per gallon. And then the second round of car rules was finalized last November, which will increase vehicle efficiency to 55 miles per gallon. So we are starting to make real, legitimate progress in reducing our consumption of oil. This rule will cut greenhouse gas emissions by 10%, 10% economy-wide by 2025 when it's fully implemented. So we're reducing the amount of oil that we use. We're cutting greenhouse gas emissions. Grassroots activists played a key role in securing that rule coming from EPA. And now we need to rally again to make sure that we don't deepen our dependence on oil, extend our dependence on oil by sinking $7 billion in a single pipeline. So I just want to thank everybody. Thank you, Sierra Club members and supporters from across the country who have been working with us alongside of grassroots activists from other organizations for so long. And thanks again for tuning in. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you.